Good evening and welcome to the Project Anime Global 2020 Keynote presentation. Wherever you are logging in from today, I hope everybody joining us is safe and well as we continue to navigate this new norm. My name is Joanna Matoki and I am the founder of Tasty Design Studio, and I am honored to moderate today's discussion. At this time, I'd like to ask our chat moderator to share the link to the Slido poll, which David and I will be referring to throughout our discussion. We'd like all of you to see the poll and respond to it. It's going to be very interesting. So take a minute to go ahead and take a look at that poll that we have for you. And you can also answer it throughout the discussion. The event industry has experienced a tremendous transformation this year due to the situation surrounding COVID-19, the global pandemic. While the pandemic definitely hit our colleagues and community in ways that will most likely have long-lasting effects, it also gave our industry the opportunity to shift our focus and oftentimes leading us to remarkable innovations. Joining me today is Mr. David Kliman, founder and president of the Kliman Group, to discuss the changes we are seeing in the events industry and how the current challenges are creating new opportunities. David will also share with us how the Events Industry Council, or the EIC task force, is compiling and creating resources for global use and what events might look like in the future. David, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with my colleagues from SPJA and around the world. Joanna, it's great to be talking with you.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much. All right, so we're gonna, this is going to be a very intimate sort of situation. It's almost like a fireside chat with David and I. We're gonna be talking about the landscape of the event industry going forward. So I think to start us off, David, I just wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about who the Event Industry Council is and what is their role in the COVID-19 Business Recovery Task Force?
Yeah, I mean, the EIC, and you have here on your screen, you can see the more than 30 member organizations. It's a consortium of trade associations that work in the live event world, from the largest to the smallest, all over 100 countries, almost 20,000 firms, 100,000 plus individuals. And it is my ecosystem. I am an event professional born and raised in this industry. And the EIC is the overarching organization that represents all of these organizations.
Well, I mean, that is a lot of organizations, and I see a lot of them very familiar logos, not faces.
Right.
But yeah, that's amazing. 100,000 plus individuals, 19,500 firms, nearly 100 countries, and I'm sure it's expanding, right?
It is, and to put some more context behind this ecosystem represents 26 million jobs around the world. And our industry, probably more than any other, has been adversely impacted by the pandemic.
And I know that you, together with some of the organizations that are part of the task force, have done research and collected data on the economic impact that it's had on these organizations, right?
Yes.
Yeah, talking about the economic impact, the events industry, as you said, is significant, right? Like the global events industry is, can you talk a little bit about that? How large?
Yeah, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Travel in itself is over $1 trillion US with a T, but the events, hundreds of billions worldwide. And I mean, no surprise to anyone on this call today, we came to a screeching halt. Whether you were in China in January, in North America, in Europe in the spring, but it is a screeching halt to our industry.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that because I think you and I both, being in the events industry, we've experienced it personally. David, you mentioned before that you had all these things lined up on your calendar for the whole year plus, right? Maybe even like a couple years because you
Yeah,
go to repeat events.
sure.
And all of a sudden, one day in March, I think it's around March, you said that it
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
disappeared.
so I mean, my quick backstory, I do research and conduct think tanks in the live event industry. So I'm a researcher and a facilitator in our space. I've consulted to SPJA. I'm very familiar with the pop culture ecosystem and the world that we're speaking about today, but I'm also in the business events, corporate events world. March 17th, I think, was the Tuesday in California when things locked down. That morning, I woke up and we had all been reading about what was
Hmm.
going on. The pandemic
Yeah.
was marching forward. But literally within the space of a day, my calendar, which was completely full every week, a flight, a meeting, an event, a speech, something,
Hmm.
between March 17th and basically the week before Christmas, I was a busy guy. And that's the
Hmm.
way I've lived for my entire career.
Hmm.
In the
Hmm.
space of 48 hours, I literally went from a full calendar to nothing, zero. And I know I am not alone in that. That was the reality for our entire live event industry. And really, the genesis of what this task force, this business recovery task force, came out of that, where I was having a conversation
Hmm.
with a very trusted colleague who produces large corporate events. And she and I were lamenting, and we were frankly shocked and awe. We just
Hmm.
saw our calendars evaporate,
Hmm.
and we realized we need to do something. We could either cry on the floor or we could take action. And what we did was take action.
Right. And that is just commendable, like seriously, because I know that I can relate to that also being in the event space, seeing all of these events disappearing, you know, um, I was panicking. Like I
Yeah.
think along with a lot of other people, probably in the audience too, that day when things started to lock down, that day when we started seeing things disappearing, events disappearing, or just scaling down tremendously,
Yeah.
right? You start to think, what now? Where do we go? What do I do?
And I think originally, at least in North America, we thought, well, it'll be weeks or a month or two, and by the
Hmm.
summer we'll start up again and
Right.
we'll just take a pause and we'll be okay. Now we're 9 months later, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that was, my thought too, as in, where do I go for resources? Where do I get the information from that's trustworthy? That is something that I can go by. So
Well,
I think that's,
that's
yeah.
exactly what the task force and the conversation that I was having back in March with my friend. How do we take control and do something about this? What
Hmm.
we identified was there was no pandemic handbook for the event industry. There was nowhere to turn to get reliable information. And there was so much noise about, well, it's this, it's that, and every state, every province, every country had something different. And we said, we need to not write the data, but we need to curate, aggregate, and publish the data. And that's what we've done. And I'm going to uh, go here. And what we did was we said, we want to create sector resources for accommodations,
Mm.
venues, transportation, risk management, meeting design, all these things, and have dedicated work streams that would be, and what's really important, this is open source. This is free to anyone. You can go to, and we'll give you the websites, but all you have to do is Google Event Industry Council COVID, and it
Hmm.
comes right
Hmm.
up and everything is right there. We'll share the exact links. but we wanted to create accepted practices. Some people might call them best practices. We wanted to vet information and say, here's what the great hotels, the convention centers, the stadiums, the airlines, the cruise lines, the car rental companies, everybody was saying about this pandemic and how you can, when we can safely convene, this is how you do it. And
so this is a standard that you guys are setting for the industry. So it's like an industry standard, and knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
Like, I think that's the thing, David. You're providing all of us with the knowledge that we needed during this time when information seemed to be sometimes overloading us.
Right.
With, like, we didn't know what to believe, where to go. But let's go ahead and share one of the poll results from our.
Please. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share the poll results for the first question. So the first question was, how have your in-person events been affected by COVID? And here we have 44% of our audience members said that their event has been canceled this year due to COVID. And I think, David, you could probably comment on this more, but this is actually a very similar question to what the EIC has done with the survey for COVID.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And the results are pretty close to this.
Yeah, very, very close. And, I think it's fair that many organizations have moved to, some people call it hybrid or omni-channel, where you might have a very close-knit face-to-face satellite group, and then lots of people convening virtually as we are here. But none of this is surprising to me at all.
Right. And I'm glad to see that 0% of our audience said that the event has proceeded without change.
Not a surprise.
Right. Not a surprise. And I'm very glad that is a 0%. But second on the result line here, event has changed entirely to virtual. That's a 33% out of our audience members. Is that also something very close to what you've seen?
And that is probably the thing that we need to truly understand is, out of this pandemic, when there's a vaccine, when things quote unquote return to normal, it's not going to be just hit the switch and it's going to be like it was in December 2019. It's going to be different, and it's going to be different for everyone uniquely. It's not going to be different in one way. But one way that is very clear is some events are just going to be virtual. And we're seeing that absolutely.
Yeah. And do you think, obviously you said that it's going to stay, right? Like, virtual events are not going to go away.
They are not going to go away at all. Even when whatever sector you look at, if you're looking at corporate meetings, if you're looking at pop culture meetings, if you're looking at trade shows, whatever it is, every sector, I believe, and every bit of research is going to indicate that there will be omni-channel participation, and you're going to see some new things. I think you're going to see satellite participation, where you'll take a pop culture event where you might have had 100,000 people in Tokyo or Los Angeles meeting. I think going forward, what you might see is 500 people in Los Angeles, 500 people in Yokohama, and 500 people in Dubai coming together, omni-channel, and thousands of people. And, I think if we had talked before the pandemic, we might say, yeah, we'll try that maybe, let's see how it goes, but wouldn't be normal. I think that's going to be quite normalized.
Right. And I think there was another survey that you guys did, and one of the questions on that survey was, how would you characterize the stakeholders of your events that have been canceled? right? And it's really fascinating to see that the best, the number one result for that question was that mostly domestic, right? 45% was mostly domestic, but
Yes.
right, like, again, like you said, locally it's probably going to be changing, but then, like, because of the innovations that we've been making since the pandemic, that's going to shift, right?
It's
Like,
going to
it's
shift. And
yeah.
I think near term, what we're also going to see is previously there was a lot of travel to go to a large event. Now, I think you're really going to see near term in North America, Europe, Japan, those countries that have strong infrastructure for rail or drive, where you're going to have what I would call euphemistically drive market attendees. So let's take Southern California as an example. You could have an event in Southern California and draw heavily from those people that could drive from Southern California, but you're probably not going to have people that are going to fly from New York or Texas or Florida, because of the sentiment where we've all realized that sheltering in place is the safest thing to do. And even when there's a vaccine, it's going to take time for people to rejigger their minds to yeah, I have the
Right.
sentiment to travel and participate, versus getting in your car or maybe getting on a train and going somewhere a lot easier to opt into that.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to ask you, David, is can you tell me what your role specifically within the EIC is, and what you've been working on recently?
Yeah, so I'm officially one of two co-founders of this group. And my role within the group is I am the chair of what's called the Destinations Work Stream. And that is for destination marketing organizations. Some people call them convention and visitors bureaus. And we have aggregated and curated from more than 60 destinations around the world a workbook, and it will be released on Friday at 11
Oh,
o'clock,
perfect. Okay.
11 o'clock Central Time. And that will be an open source, will be out there. And would you like me to put the links up for all the work streams?
Sure. I think if you do that in the chat here, the chat moderator can actually pass it along to the audience. So I think that would be great. And also, we are probably going to be collecting any of the resources for later.
Great. Yeah, they're going to be shared
yeah.
in the blog. We've got
Right.
all the websites for these tools. And so I'm chairing this group on destinations, but there's 11 work streams. 5 of them have been released. Meeting and event design,
Yeah.
hotel guide.
Did you want to share that on the screen, David? I think you had one of those slides, right?
Yeah, I have it right. Is that up now?
No, it's not. Did you want to share it real quick?
Yeah, I will. Pardon me. I will.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's worth sharing. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw. Yeah, the rolling releases.
Yep. So here are the rolling releases. So transportation was just released. The other ones, and then this week my group, the Destinations Guide, comes out, followed by business continuity and others. And these are actual workbooks. They run about 30 pages. They're done in flipbook style. They're open source, free of charge, and they have truly implementable, usable tools that you can use: codes of conduct, risk guides, event design guides. And I'm really pleased and proud of the work that we have created.
I mean, again, like, I think it's wonderful that you are all providing this to the industry members, open sourced and free, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that is, I think, really great that you're offering this service to everybody. And again, like I mentioned previously, knowledge is power, really. You just have to know. And this is really great. So I know, and so I know that many of the audience is joining us from across the Pacific. Do you have any information you can share with us for those joining us from Japan? Yeah,
Yes,
you're showing
here,
us.
and we'll put this in the guide, but here are 4 websites that colleagues of mine in Japan have shared with me. And these are all specific to doing live events in Japan, the tools that are needed, the guidelines that are needed. Several of these websites are only in Japanese, but of course that works just fine for our distinguished colleagues from Japan. Some are in English. And again, we will share these in the blog. And then I've got here's a bunch of other tools. We have information in English, Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and I'm forgetting one.
Yeah, that was my next question to you, because like these resources are amazing, and to have them in multi languages too, right? Like that's very, yeah. Thank you so much for doing this, David.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, we're proud that they're really global. You know, EIC is not a North American centric organization, it's a global organization. I consider myself a global citizen, and we take it seriously that we take a global view.
Right. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the second poll question that we had with our audience. I'm going to share the screen, but the question was, what is the biggest challenge for your organization currently? So here we have the results for the second one. What do you think, David? Is this interesting? Is this a little different, or is this something that you've expected?
Effectively and finding resources. Well, finding resources is our core reason for being,
right?
And that does not surprise me. Communication, communication, communication. This tracks exactly with every bit of research.
Right. And, you know, we, I guess for the Slido, we weren't able to include a other section that you could write in your answer. But, you know, audience members, if you had anything that didn't fit into any of these choices now, go ahead and put them in the chat. And we would love to hear, you know, what are the challenges that you are all facing right now, you know, and again, I think, David, it's really good that we're talking about these challenges, because people need to know that others are feeling the same as they are. Yeah, and we want to help. Exactly. We're definitely in this together. And to really talk about the issues and the challenges that we all face is, once again, more knowledge, right? Knowing that we're not we're not alone. Because I think that's how I felt in the beginning when all of this was going down. I thought, oh my God, am I the only person that feels panicked about this? I don't know. Yeah. And I think that's really great.
You know, it brings up a point. Something we realized quickly is that health and well-being of event professionals and event suppliers, truly the mental health impact of the crisis had to be acknowledged. We have a specific work stream on health and wellness. And so it talks about the psychological impact of isolation, that people feel alone. We don't know where all the resources are. And we took that seriously, that if we're going to truly recover and come out the other side of this, that we have to have a mental health component to this.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And again, that word recovery task force, it's not just economic recovery, it's recovery, right? For the industry, which is made up of individual event organizers and people that work within our industry. And if they're not well, the industry is not well. So I agree 100%. So going back really quickly to the resources that the AIC task force is sharing with us, Do you think there are some key things to keep in mind when referring to these resources for your specific event, for instance?
Yeah, I think I know we have what we call internally a go no go decision grid, and I'm going to share that
Yeah.
with the caveat that you really need to look at this on your screen and and really dig into it. But what this has is a framework that you can use to determine the feasibility of meeting in person. And it's level 1 to 4. Level 1 is business as usual. So that's just the way we were. But then escalating up, and we've designed this to be a one-page guide that you could use in cooperation with your suppliers. So if you're an event runner or an event producer and you're working with a venue or a destination, a hotel, you should be able to take this one-page grid and look at it and make a determination, is it safe to meet? And, you know, this is something you can download this. It's easy to use. We also have a code of conduct where we, if you're going to meet face to face, you should expect your attendees to behave responsibly. And that's going to be locally based. So I think it's in the world. You know, these are just kind of high level things. The code of conduct takes that and really spells it out. All these resources are in the guide.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and share the the third result for the poll. The third question on the poll was, how prepared do you feel to address COVID-19 concerns? And I think this is perfect segue from what we were just talking about with the go, no go chart.
Yeah.
So here are the results from our audience members. What do you think, David? Is this?
Well, this absolutely tracks.
Yeah.
You know, 9-10% saying I'm not prepared at all, to most people saying I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be. You know, our industry is made up of event professionals, and we pride ourselves pre-pandemic of knowing how to get stuff done.
Right.
And now there's no playbook. There was no playbook to how to produce an event or cancel an event or any of this. And so this lack of being prepared is not something we feel comfortable with in our world.
No, exactly. I totally understand that. I relate to this 100%. I am all about being prepared, thinking about the what ifs and all the other things that come from all of that. And because of not knowing is just uncomfortable for all of us, right?
Totally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, you know, we come back to the task force. That was our mantra of trying to make people feel like they had qualified, well-researched information that could address locally the issues that they were confronted with. Because, you know, we're an industry that, you know, we say yes, we get stuff done, we do it, we pull miracles out, you know, all the stuff of live events. And we went on hold overnight. And that was astonishing.
Yes. So, you know, we have a lot of things, so many things to discuss. I'm going to go into the last result for the poll because we're going to have to transition to Q&A. We're getting a lot of questions already.
Good.
So
fire away.
I'm going to go ahead and transition to the last question on the poll real quick before we go into Q&A. So I'm going to share the screen. So the fourth question on the poll was, do you currently have an event scheduled
Yep.
If so, in which quarter?
Yep.
So the
This,
top answer here is Q2 in
yeah, and that
2021.
doesn't surprise me. I think most of us are cautiously optimistic that a
Mhm.
vaccine is going to be delivered. But as Joanna and I were talking earlier, it's not just delivering to the population of one country, it's delivering to the 7+ billion people on the
Right.
planet. And, we don't live in bubbles. We don't
Mhm.
meet truly in bubbles. And
Mhm.
so second quarter next year feels about right, but I want to be realistic
Yeah.
and say all of us need to track this. And when I'm asked, when do you think we'll come back to the levels that we had been at
Mhm.
pre-pandemic? I truly believe that we are several years away. And I
Mhm.
saw information this morning from Europe on trade shows that said that at least 2 cycles of shows will need to take place before the third cycle to even be hopeful to get back to pre-pandemic levels. And I know that sounds pessimistic, but I think we need to be realistic about how long the recovery is going to be.
Right. And I think as event professionals, we are those kind of cautious people, right? Cautiously positive people. So
Yep.
yeah, and I totally understand. So okay, let's move on into the Q&A from the audience.
Please.
I have a great question here from the audience. How do you imagine pent-up demand for live events will balance against pandemic concerns? What's the turning point is the question.
Yeah, I think the turning point is absolutely going to be vaccine,
Hmm.
widespread adoption. I think realistically in the United States, we'll see 60, 70% adoption, and that will get us to a point where people, at least in the United States, will feel like, I can go. Pent up demand is real, but I think what is overwhelming that is caution,
Hmm.
because there's this whole mantra in the United States now, you know if you have Thanksgiving, you may have a funeral at Christmas. Well, people
Mm,
don't want to have the funeral. The pandemic
right.
is
Yeah.
real, and
Hmm.
even though there is a lot of pent up demand, it's going to take widespread global adoption of a vaccine before, I believe, where the research shows you're going to have widespread adoption of people opting in to attend live events in mass.
Hmm. Thank you. Next question from the audience. How can event organizers align support industries like venues, hotels, and etc. for them rather than against them when it comes to contract obligations and returning as soon as safe?
Yeah, it's a great point. Contracts. I'm hoping that generally speaking, most of you on this call have had good experiences with postponing your events.
Hmm.
Every bit of research, there's some exceptions. There's a few suppliers out there that are getting bad reputations, but generally speaking, venues, hotels, airlines, vendors with whom you would contract have been extraordinarily cooperative
Hmm.
about releasing obligations of contracts and postponing for a future date. I really hope you're seeing that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
what I am also seeing is unprecedented cooperation between
Hmm.
competitors,
Hmm.
where, let's just an example of city A competing tooth and nail against city B for an event.
Hmm.
All of that competitive nature has been thrown away. Hotel company A versus hotel company B. Everybody is cooperating. And I
Hmm.
hope you're seeing that. Um, what generally is happening is vendors are allowing event professionals to postpone to a future date that's aspirational, second quarter next year. It's tough to find space for
Hmm.
next year because things are so compressed.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
hope you're seeing that cooperative nature.
And that's perfect, because that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you about. What were some surprises you've seen within the industry as we navigated through these unprecedented situations? And yes, no, I've seen it too locally, communities coming together, competitors that usually, fight tooth and nail, like what you mentioned, helping each other, providing information for each other, and just the sentiment of we're all in this together, we're all suffering. And
Absolutely.
I think again that comes back to the shifting the focus that was caused by the pandemic. So another question coming in from the audience: how can larger events that operate on a 100% volunteer model work more closely with industry organizations like the EIC?
Yeah, great point. So the Event Industry Council is a consortium of associations. So I would say join an association like MPI or live event professional organization, which is a member of EIC. So that is the way that you can really increase your network, find practices that may not be published in open source. But it's not like if you're an event runner or an event professional, you wouldn't join EIC, you would join another association that is a member of EIC.
Perfect. And yeah, and I've been, surfing the EIC website a lot, looking at all these resources and all the benefits of membership. I'm sure you could go into a little bit about that too, but there's webinars too, right? That you
Oh yeah.
offer.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now, the annual meeting is taking place. When we're done in 20 minutes, a keynote speech that I'll be logging into for what's called, it's not a big fee to be part of that, but you don't need to do this right now. There's lots of different webinars, and the task force does webinars, and they're in a library source with lots of information. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of resources.
Perfect. Let's see. So next question. So, I think this is something that I really want to go over with you. And honestly and openly, let's talk about the future of the events ecosystem, right? Like, what do you foresee for the industry, let's say in the next 6 months, 1 year? What do you think, David, from all the research that you've seen?
Yeah, I think the next 6 months are going to be brutal. I think, you're not going to see a lot of face-to-face events happening. There will be some exceptions, but generally speaking, you're not going to see a lot of events taking place. Provided a vaccine, it really hits the streets and is hundreds of millions of people are inoculated. I think about a year from now, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter next year, you're going to start to see the return to live events, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be different. And you need to be prepared for that. Any thought about, well, I can just pick up and use my same pre-pandemic plan, don't do that, because you will be burned. You need to have a different point of view. You need to have hybrid channels. You need to have your contracts are probably going to be different. It's really hard to anticipate attendance numbers. If you have a hotel block, hotel blocks are just kind of impossible to figure out right now. I know most of you are probably just booking event space, but even understanding how many exhibitors you're going to have is really, really tricky. So be careful.
And so, yeah, we come back to that code of conduct that you mentioned before, earlier, right? So does the code of
Yes,
conduct actually, can the other stakeholders, like the exhibitors, actually can they look at that also, or is it more for attendees?
absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I would call it any stakeholder at an event.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just an attendee. It's your staff, your vendors, your exhibitors, anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you want them to opt in to participate safely. This
Mm-hmm.
is about safe participation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can ace safe participation, the rest will follow. So yeah, I mean, you should have a code of conduct in the same way, in where a code of conduct, this is in that line. This is the way we manage our events safely. You can't come in with a weapon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you do, it has to be a fake weapon. You've got
Right.
to wear a mask. You've got to do these things. Those sort of things apply to every
Mm-hmm.
stakeholder.
And is that code of conduct available in multi languages also, David?
I'm sorry, say again. You broke up really briefly. I missed the
I'm sorry.
question.
Is the code of conduct available in multi languages also?
Right now, I believe it's in English and Spanish, but it
Okay.
will it will be translated. And if we have anybody in Japan that can translate into Japanese, we'd welcome that.
Okay, great, perfect. So we have another question coming in from the audience. Question is, do you think that since people are becoming so accustomed to virtual events, they will be less willing to go to in-person events once restrictions are lifted?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tricky. I think we're going to lose some people. I think there's no doubt that there
Mm-hmm.
will be a percentage of your ecosystem that's going to say, this works for me. I can
Mm-hmm.
get my experience this way. However,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in face-to-face events, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that you will see a return. It's not going to be instant, it's going to be slow, but there is pent-up demand, and humans, generally speaking, like the face-to-face interaction.
Mm-hmm.
However, there will be some people that are going to maybe more introverted, however you want to call it, that are going to say, this works for me. I can manage my business, my life this way. And that's a new post-pandemic reality that you're going to have to live with.
Right. Okay, so this is my last question. We're running out of time a little bit. I know there's so many things to cover, but my question, David, is the COVID-19. So the pandemic has certainly had a great impact on the events industry economically, right? We
Yeah.
already talked about that, but what are some steps that the EIC is taking to support the specifically economic recovery after the pandemic?
So specifically on that, if you surf to a website that is Go Live Together, there is a consortium that EIC is part of. And I will say, full disclosure, this is US centric. It's lobbying the United States government on behalf of the tens of millions of people that are in the live event space. And Go Live Together is advocating for government action and relief for the live events industry. There are green shoots of this taking place in other countries, but Go Live Together is the US version of it. And
Thank you
EIC
so
is part
much.
of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. So it looks like we're out of
We're
time.
out of time.
Every time we have these panels, I'm just always thinking, oh, I wish there was more time, because there's so many things to talk about. And it just feels good, right, David, to
Yeah,
talk
it's
to
great.
other event organizers and just really relate to the things that we've been experiencing. But I want to thank you once again for joining us tonight for such a timely discussion. All of these golden, like insights that you shared with us. Thank you so much, David.
My pleasure. It's been an honor and a privilege to talk with everybody.
And we
Joanna,
look
thank you so
forward.
much. Great job.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the chat moderator said that, there's a lot of sentiment in the chat from the audience saying there's so much gratitude for having these resources available, open source and free, and in multiple languages too. So again, we hear you guys. Thank you so much. And again, like, we look forward to hearing more from the EIC task force in the future. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight for Project Anime Global 2020's keynote presentation. We hope to see you all in person at some events soon, but please be safe. And thank you so much. Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And good night, everybody.
Stay safe,
Good
everyone.
night. Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.